Here you could also hold the Grand Prix, Thomas said dreamily, looking somewhere into the clouds. Where are we? Ecclestone immediately reacted and, clinging to the porthole of his Learjet, began to gaze intently through the smoky glasses at the infinitely distant land that slowly floated 11 kilometers below them. Over Hungary, Rahony replied. I'm sure you will be able to negotiate with the Hungarians. From this conversation in 1983, the history of now legendary Hungarian Grand Prix began, the first and only Formula One race to break through the Iron Curtain. The fact that the honor to host the Grand Prix of the World Cup was the first of the countries of the Socialist Bloc was awarded to Hungary probably wasn't by chance. Of all the states of the former Eastern Bloc, Hungary was one of the few that could boast of notable achievements in motor racing. True, it was a long time ago, even before the war. Yeah, the first Hungarian Grand Prix took place back in 1936 in Nypliget Park in the center of Budapest. The winner was Tazio Nuvolari on Alfa Romeo, who defeated the drivers of two invincible German factories, Auto Union and Mercedes-Benz, in those years. On this, however, the glorious history of Hungarian motorsport is almost exhausted. After this Grand Prix, the race was forgotten for half a century due to the Second World War and politics. Despite the proximity of the borders with Western powers, by the beginning of the 80s, motorsport in the Hungarian People's Republic had fallen into final decline, even compared to the levels that existed then in the Soviet Union. And yet, it was Hungary, not the USSR, that first hosted the F1 World Cup. It all started, as you already know, with a short conversation on the plane between the president of the Formula One Constructors Association, Bernie Ecclestone, and the Hungarian businessman Thomas Rahony, who lived in Brazil in those years, and thanks to this he had the opportunity to freely communicate with the sharks of capitalism like Bernie. It's no secret that after the success of the Moscow Olympics, Ecclestone, who struggled to push the boundaries of his kingdom and give Formula One a truly world-class status, slept and saw how to leave the notorious Iron Curtain. In the 1980s, the world was divided, and so was motorsport. Now probably few people know, but the Soviet Union had its own motorsports federation, which held its own Formula One championship. However, Bernie Ecclestone was determined to bring his successful racing franchise to the Eastern Bloc. Ecclestone negotiated the organization of a race around the walls of the Kremlin with General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev, who loved cars and speed. But in 1982, Brezhnev died, and Bernie had to deal with the impenetrable Soviet military bureaucracy, those of generals, who were not particularly interested in the sport of high speeds. No wonder that negotiations with them failed. That is why Bernie happily jumped at Rahony's offer and after a couple of weeks personally visited the Hungarian embassy in Brazil to offer the Hungarian one of his Grand Prix. Then everything was a matter of bureaucratic techniques. The Brazilian diplomat sent a memorandum to Budapest, where the piece of paper wandered around the offices of the Ministry of Sport for several months, after which Ecclestone and Rahony received an invitation to visit the Hungarian capital. Apparently, Bernie made a favorable impression on Buda, or maybe the Hungarian leader just knew how to count money much better than docile generals, and was stunned by the flow of currency, which, as Bernie assured, will pour into the country during the Grand Prix. But a few days after Ecclestone visit, the National Automobile Club received an order to urgently develop a project for the future autodrome. Initially, two options for the Formula One ring were discussed at the meeting of the Hungarian Automobile Club, but both were rejected. The first, the plan for the reconstruction of the old racetrack in the alleys of Nypliget Park, was banned by the municipality of Budapest, and the second, the Hungarian Defense Minister Lajos Zinegi, whose hunting lodge was located nearby from the site of the proposed highway. Only after that, a project for the construction of a highway in the Westland in the Valley of the Three Springs, near the tiny town of Magyaród, which is 20 kilometers northwest of the center of Budapest, appeared. At that time, it seemed that the place was chosen ideally. The nature amphitheater surrounding the future route significantly reduced the cost of the project, providing additional seat for the public and allowing at first to confine itself to the construction of only a few stands. A few months later, a contract was signed with Fokke, and on October 15, 1985, the construction of the circuit began in Magyaróda, designed by the Hungarian architect István Pap. When Rahani and I first came to look at the future circuit in the middle of winter 1985, it was a frozen untouched steppe, covered with snow. I had no idea that a track could be built there so quickly. Ecclestone admitted in April 1986, when FIA commissioners Derek Hungary and Jan Brown went to Budapest to accept the ring, built by Hungarian workers, in less than 7 months. One of the journalists once admitted that the outlines of Hungarian remind him of a bear standing on its hind legs and ready to roar. Drivers refer to the Hungarian simply as a big karting track, alluding to its narrow and overly winding ring. But such a configuration of the route was due to two factors: underground sources that beat in the valley of the Free Springs and the socialist policy of the Hungarian People's Republic. Don't forget, due to the fact that Hungary was a country of socialism and they had to build the safest and therefore the slowest track of the championship. Imagine what would have happened if at the first socialist Grand Prix of the capitalism Formula 1 someone, God forbid, was injured or killed. Although then, in the mid-80s, many sincerely consider the Hungarian to be one of the best Formula 1 circuits. On August 10, 1986, on the day of the first socialist Grand Prix in the history of Formula 1, something unimaginable was happening in the vicinity of the Hungaroring. The most modern highway in Hungary, M3, at the entrances to the autodrome was densely packed. Fans of a film from the socialist camp, who, for the first time, had the opportunity to see the Queen of Motorsport with their own eyes, gathered from all countries of the Eastern Bloc without exception. Hungarian Grand Prix attracted no less interest from Western tourists, many of whom came to the race in Budapest simply to overcome the notorious Iron Curtain for the first time in their lives. In addition, a visit to the Hungarian Grand Prix cost mere pennies by Western standards. Cheap food and accommodation, the fabulous beauty of the Dunaj and Budapest, the Sea of Sun and the cheapest race tickets in Europe. What could be better for the fans? It's no coincidence that on the day of the race, according to various estimates, from 200 to 260,000 people gathered at the Hungaroring. This set an attendance record that lasted 9 years until 1995 Australian Grand Prix. The organizer of the Hungarian Grand Prix for many years was Thomas Frank, another friend of Ecclestone. The holding of the first Grand Prix in the then socialist Hungarian People's Republic already became a sensation, and in addition, the audience saw on the new track an exciting struggle between two great Brazilians and rivals, Ayrton Senna and Nelson Piquet. The winning trophy then went to Piquet, whose Williams Honda was faster than the Ayrton's Lotus Renault. Piquet went around the outside of Ayrton's car in the first turn, in the fight for the victory. The Hungarian Grand Prix was the first Formula 1 race to be shown, albeit recorded, on the Soviet television in the form of a 45-minute story called International Motorsport Competitions. However, the impression of the track itself was slightly divided. I have never seen such a good track. Three-time world champion Niki Lauda was scattered in praise of Hungaroring. This is a great example for Western countries, which have a lot to learn. Of course, the track is very difficult for the drivers, but the job of the F1 driver is to solve difficult problems. Still, after all, Lauda himself, who had retired from racing the previous winter, didn't need to solve these problems anymore. But the current drivers, for the most part, reacted to the Hungarian much more restrained. Probably this weekend I was twisted more than in my entire career, Senna joked. No words, the organization is fantastic, but the work of the Hungarian judges on the track isn't good. I don't blame them, because I know that this is in fact their first experience as a Grand Prix. But when you go off the track and they spend a lot of time just to get to your car, it's a disgrace. In addition, due to the location of the autodrome and the nature of the soil in Magyaróda, the track turned out to be very dirty. The wind that blew over the hills caused heaps of the smallest and terribly corrosive brown dust on the asphalt, which the riders then had to clear with their wheels of their own cars, hence the large number of dropping out the track.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very good. They've done a wonderful, wonderful job. They've done exactly what I asked them to do, and obviously I'm very happy and satisfied.
How difficult was it all?
It doesn't seem very difficult now looking back, but it was difficult when we started looking from the beginning, you know?
Now, what is their objective? And we have here an extreme demonstration of Western technology. What are they hoping to achieve as a result of it?
Well, I think it's a big PR exercise, really, and I imagine it's going to put the prestige of Hungary up within the Eastern Bloc. And also, obviously, they're hoping to attract business here. We've got a lot of people coming here that are interested in talking to people about business.
Out of courtesy or fear of Bernie Ecclestone's wrath, many then simply kept silent. And we can say that the first race at the Hungaroring went off without a hitch. But a year later, the first problems hit Hungary. In 1987, due to the rapid growth of inflation in Hungary, an economic crisis broke out. Demonstrations began. The government, trying to squeeze as much currency out of the Formula One Grand Prix, inflated ticket prices, and most Hungarians could no longer afford them. In addition, every year the riders began to show their dissatisfaction with a too narrow and winding track more and more clearly. And in 1989, the Hungarian had to be slightly corrected, getting rid of the third hairpin. But that didn't help either. A year later, the race won in jeopardy for the first time. It wasn't possible to find an ideal sponsor. And although the powerful company Philip Morris, the owner of the Marlboro brand, soon nevertheless allocated money for the Grand Prix, then the Hungarian stage, which, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Eastern Bloc, lost all its exclusivity in the eyes of Bernie Ecclestone, has been under threat of cancellation almost every year. Exactly 10 years after the first race in Budapest, the Hungarian Grand Prix was once again sold out. In August 1996, about 200,000 fans from all over Eastern Europe gathered on the hills of the valley. True, this time the fans came to say goodbye to the Hungaroring. Complaints from the teams about the perpetually muddy track, the uncomfortable paddock and the gigantic traffic jams on the only road leading to the circuit, because of which the riders were late for training more than once during these 10 years, finally had their effect, and the FIA excluded the Hungarian stage from the provisional calendar of the 1997 World Championship. Therefore, then, in the summer of 1996, everyone gathered at the Hungarian ring was sure that they were present at the last Hungarian Grand Prix. However, the track, which was used in fact once a year, the cancellation of the Grand Prix threatened an economic disaster, and the Hungarian authorities, regardless of any cost, began to frantically reconstruct the circuit. As a result, by the next summer the Hungarian had changed almost beyond recognition. On the site of unusual two-story paddock, on one tier of which there were boxes and team buses, and on the other motorhomes, a powerful foundation was built, which made it possible to raise the tents of the teams to the same level as the garages. The press center has been rebuilt, and most importantly, they secured riders, journalists and team guests from traffic jams on the outskirts of the circuit, reserving the right lane of the M3 highway for them from Budapest and building a new road from the highway to the circuit, named after the godfather of the Hungarian Grand Prix, Avenue Bernie Ecclestone. Well, for all his pragmatism, could the owner of the big circus, after such an obvious sign of attention to his person, deprive the Hungarians of the Grand Prix? However, we must pay tribute to the Hungarian authorities. The reconstruction in 1997 didn't end there, and the next year they took up the track. Due to the natural landscape and underground waters, it turned out to be almost impossible to change its configuration. But the Hungarian nevertheless took several important steps and slightly rejuvenated the ring. To begin with, as far as possible, the access roads were asphalted in order to at least slightly reduce the amount of dust applied to the route. The 13-meter starting straight was extended by a meter. The radius of the first and last turns was slightly changed. The number of boxes was reduced, which made it possible to increase the area of each of service areas. They built a new paddock for support races. A super gold stand equipped with 2,800 plastic seats were erected in front of the boxes, and the racing school of Gerhard Berger was opened in the area of the fifth turn. Apparently, only when they seriously took up the reconstruction of the autodrome, the Hungarians realized that there was no limit to perfection, and till then, almost every year the Hungarian has been slightly modernized. In a word, after 10 years of lethargic sleep, the Hungarian has changed almost beyond recognition. But although the autodrome was noticeably prettier over the past 5 years, the Hungarians haven't been able to eradicate its main drawback, a narrow and slow track on which it's almost impossible to overtake. It's great to drive one lap on such a track, David Coulthard admits, but the whole race is already akin to a feat. You can either love or hate the Hungaroring. There is no middle ground. Alas, most drivers hate Hungaroring. In terms of average speed, the Hungarian is only ahead of Monaco. It's a very slow track where it's not easy to find the right settings. Overtaking at the Hungarian is difficult. All the wide safety zones allow you to take risks, and two dependent DRS zones make it easy to fight for positions. Cars are tuned for maximum downforce. Aerodynamic settings are similar to those used in Barcelona or Monaco. The suspension should be soft enough to provide stable contact with the track. It's extremely important to make the tires work without overheating problems on the course. 12 of 14 corners are driven at speed in the region of 200 km per hour, which requires optimal aerodynamic balance, good mechanical grip, and efficient acceleration. Engine power and the efficiency of recuperation systems aren't as important here as they are on many other tracks. There are high demands on the physical condition of the riders, who are almost all the time in the braking zones and in the corners, not being able to rest, except for the main straight. Braking isn't too strong, but brake wear is high due to the fact that you don't have time to cool down. At the Hungarian, it's important to get off to a good start, as the peloton tends to switch in slow second and third turns. At the same time, the straight line to the first turn is quite long, 400 meters from pole to the braking point. Yeah, there are few opportunities for overtaking in Hungary, so boring races in the Hungarian when the cars follow each other aren't uncommon. However, this fact didn't prevent very interesting events from happening. There were spectacular breakthrough at the Hungarian Grand Prix. In 1989, Nigel Mansell was able to make his way to the top of the podium starting from 12th position on the grid, beating one opponent after another, including Senna. Then, in 1990, Thierry Boutsen, who started from pole, managed to win on the slower Williams, keeping Senna's much more nimble McLaren behind. The Brazilian couldn't find a loophole to attack the Belgian. The chosen strategy as well as the result in qualifying is also often the recipe of success on the Hungarian track. This was best demonstrated during the 1998 Grand Prix by Michael Schumacher, who, thanks to a free-stop strategy, was able to get ahead of McLaren drivers Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard and finished first. Also in Hungary, several drivers celebrated their first triumphs in Formula 1, and the first of them was Damon Hill, who won in 1993 at Williams-Renault. A memorable Hungarian Grand Prix for the fans and for Damon Hill was also the 1997 race. That year, Damon performed for the Rose team and was phenomenally able to qualify in third position. At the start, he completely took second place and, after a few laps, attacked in the first turn and passed Michael Schumacher, taking the lead in the race. Damon began to build up the gap, and by 2/3 of the distance he was able to break away from his opponents by more than half of a minute. But with 2 laps to go, Damon had a gearbox problem, And on the last lap, Villeneuve almost went off the track in a dangerous maneuver and bypassed Hill. As a result, Damon was upset and came to the finish line only second. Fernando Alonso made his triumph in 2003. However, the race weekend started with a very bad crash by Jordan rider Ralf Fährmann. Fortunately, the driver escaped with minor concussion and bruises, but he had to miss the Hungarian Grand Prix and the following Italian Grand Prix at Monza. The very same race in 2003 was remembered for the debut victory in the career of the youngest driver of the Renault team, Fernando Alonso. At the time the Spaniard was the youngest winner of the Grand Prix. Fernando, starting from the pole position, took the lead in the race and, until the finish line, he didn't concede it to anyone. Also at the Hungarian Grand Prix, for the first time in the history of Formula 1, the Hungarian Zoltan Gender made his debut, replacing the injured Ralf Fährmann in the Jordan team. The 2006 Grand Prix was spectacular. Then, on the day of the race, which usually takes place in hot condition at the Hungaroring, it rained for the first time since 20 years after the debut of the Hungarian round. As a result, the first at the finish line was Jenson Button at Honda, who started the race from a distant 14th position. For the British rider, it was the first victory in his career, and for the Hungarian Grand Prix, it was another record. Klaus Mansell was able to win starting from 12th position, while Button was already from 14th. As it usually happens on rainy weekends, there were errors that led to drops out from the track, and there were errors that led to serious accidents. And there were also unscrewed nuts on the pit stop, which led to the gathering of the leader of the race, Fernando Alonso. Ferrari, on the other hand, made a mistake with tactics of tire replacing, which led to the gathering of Michael Schumacher. It was in such difficult conditions that Jenson Button showed his driving skills and managed to win. The start of 2008 Hungarian Grand Prix was remembered for Massa's magnificent breakthrough from third to first position. It seemed that a tire puncture would prevent Lewis from finishing successfully, but the explosion of the engine on Felipe Massa's Ferrari 3 laps before the finish line gave Hamilton such important championship points for him. The winner was Kovalainen in the end, and for the Finn it was the first and only victory in Formula 1. Timo Glock from Toyota finished second, for whom it was his first podium, and reigning champion Kimi Räikkönen was third. The 2009 Grand Prix almost became tragic. In the second part of qualifying, a sprint from the car of Rubin Barrichello hit the helmet of Felipe Massa. The sprint hit the gap between the visor and the helmet. The Brazilian lost consciousness and crashed into the protective barrier at high speed. With a concussion and a crack in the skull, Massa was taken to the hospital, where he underwent several surgeries and was allowed to go home a week later. However, the recovery process took a long time. Felipe returned behind the wheel only at the beginning of 2010. Another debut podium went to Esteban Ocon at the Hungarian Grand Prix in 2021. Half an hour before the start, it began to rain again. Umbrellas were open in the stands, and the FIA announced a change in weather conditions. All riders started on the intermediate tires. At the start, Hamilton kept the lead. In the first turn there was a blockage. Bottas lost several places and slowed down with braking. He crashed into Norris and Perez. Norris into Verstappen. Behind, Stroll jumped onto the grass and knocked out Leclerc. Leclerc crashed into Ricciardo. Bottas, Leclerc, Stroll and Perez were eliminated from the fight. Verstappen, Mazepin, Norris and Giovinazzi turned into the pits, changing tires. At the exit from the pit lane, Verstappen's car lost its right side deflector. The safety car appeared, but the race was immediately stopped by red flags. It was necessary to remove the debris. The top 10 at the time of the race stop: Hamilton, Ocon, Vettel, Sainz, Tsunoda, Latifi, Alonso, Russell, Raikkonen, Schumacher. The rain is gone, the sun came out. 28 minutes after the race was stopped, a restart was announced. Before the race restart, everyone except Hamilton turned into the pits for slicks. Hamilton stood alone on the starting line, and after his start, drivers were able to leave the pit lane. After passing the circle, Hamilton also turned into the pits for slicks, returning to the track last. On lap 18, Vettel tried to attack Ocon for the lead, but Esteban picked up the pace and stayed ahead. On lap 37, Vettel changed tires. On lap 38, Ocon returned to the track in front of Vettel. Sebastian picked up the pace and tried to attack, but Esteban stayed ahead. Esteban Ocon won the Hungarian Grand Prix, scoring his first career win and becoming the 111th Grand Prix winner in the World Championship history. This is the first victory for a French rider in a French car with a French engine since Austria '83, and the first for the Alpine team. Sebastian Vettel finished second, but after the finish line he was disqualified. In the tanks of his car there was less than 1 liter of fuel required for analysis. Lewis Hamilton regained the lead in the individual standings. By the way, it's the British driver who has the most victories at the Hungaroring. Lewis celebrated his first triumph in Hungary in 2007, when he spent his first season in Formula 1 with McLaren. In 2020, the victory at the Hungarian circuit for Lewis was already the 8th in a row. The same situation was for Michael Schumacher, who managed to finish first at one track, at the French Grand Prix in Magny course. Schumacher has 4 victories in Hungary, and Ayrton Senna, who won at this track in 1988, 1991 and 1992, closes the top 3 of the best drivers of the Hungaroring. As for the teams, the record for the number of victories at the Hungaroring is McLaren. Its riders have won the Hungarian Grand Prix 11 times. Yeah, when Ecclestone brought the big circus to Hungary 37 years ago, he made no secret of the fact that he considers this GP as a kind of temporary springboard for moving east into Eastern Europe and Asia. However, thanks to the effort of organizers, the transit through Hungary was delayed and it seems can last for a very long time. According to the current contract, the Hungarian stage will remain on the Formula 1 calendar until 2027.